Hello, welcome to Prescott Today show. I'm Harry Oberg, Prescott Mayor. I'm out here at the airport with the Prescott Regional Fire Center, and with me today I have Pete Gordon, Fire, Fuels, and Aviation Staff Officer with the Prescott National Forest Southwest Region. One of the things that I'm hearing quite often, particularly this time of the year, May, June time frame, from people in the surrounding area and in Prescott, is their concern about wildfires. And as you know, as we move into the May and June time frame, things become drier. We don't have any rains. We get a lot of winds. Heat starts to rise, and humidity drops. And these are prime conditions for wildfires to be initiated. So I think what I'd like to do is just say hello, Pete, and glad you could take a few minutes out of your busy day to give us an interview or an introduction to the fire facility here and what you do, and the people that you have here and the capabilities that you have to support fighting wildfires in the Prescott area.
Yeah. Well, Mayor, thank you for the opportunity and your interest in coming out here to visit with us. So it's an honor. So happy to be here. I guess I'll start with telling you a little bit about getting ready for fire season and what it is we do. It's a little bit further reaching than just this facility out here at the airport. We spend year round managing the fuels around the Prescott area and across the forest. And one of the things that we've been talking about the last couple of years, especially this year, is trying to maybe change a little bit of our thinking that the first step towards initial attack in a wildfire is really the fuels work we do in mitigating the hazards ahead of time, and primarily trying now to focus on where can we give firefighters the tactical advantage, and whether that's homeowners protecting their own property through FireWise efforts, or doing our part on the Forest Service side of a boundary, and frankly gives me a nice opportunity to brag about the partnerships we've had with the City of Prescott and our surrounding communities, including the Department of Emergency Services with Yavapai County. Several years, probably nearly 2 decades worth of partnering, not only on this hazardous fuels mitigation work, this first step towards initial attack, but the response as well. And I know that's your primary interest here today is how we respond. And again, that rich history of cooperation is plentiful, I guess, is the way I'd say that. Not only Prescott Fire Department, but Central Yavapai Fire District, which is now Central Arizona Fire, Groom Creek, Walker, Mayor, and even our Verde Valley partners. Long history of training together and responding together to large and small fires.
And I think you also work with the Yavapai Emergency Management.
Yes, we do, quite extensively. A lot of the pre-planning and training, they've been instrumental in helping coordinate all that among the many entities, including our summer camps, believe it or not. As you think about some of the hazards during the summer, we worry about all the kids in the woods, literally. And so the county has been very instrumental in coordinating a group and a response should we have a wildfire that may threaten one or more of our summer camps. So, yeah.
I think what I'd like to also inform the people about, this is a permanent facility. You're here year-round. But I think you basically increase your staffing here when you know we're going into the fire season. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. Yeah. So we do. We have a permanent staff all year round, including not just here at this facility, but our district offices as well, that do all the preparedness, training, and readiness for fire season and all this fuels work. But then in the summertime, we bring on several more seasonal firefighters, and some of our permanent seasonal workforce comes on in the spring to get ready for fire season. So we definitely staff up, and we are fully staffed at this point.
Can you explain a little bit about what capabilities you have here to support firefighting?
Yeah, so here at this facility, at the Fire Center, it serves multiple purposes, and we have all sorts of levels of resources here, from local resources to regional and national resources. This facility, as you mentioned, permanent facility, sits right here adjacent to the airport property on the tarmac with access to the tarmac. So one of our facilities, or one of our functions here at this facility, is the air tanker base. And as you recall, you were here for a ribbon cutting. We were able to expand this year a joint effort with the City of Prescott and some capital improvement opportunities with the Forest Service. We were successful in pulling together a little over $2 million worth of improvements to the tanker base and the ability to expand to a third tanker pit, as well as upgrading and being able to facilitate the larger jetted fleet that we're now utilizing. So that's one of the functions here is the air tanker base. We also have a regional dispatch office upstairs that serves multiple agencies, not only the Prescott National Forest, but the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the Bureau of Land Management between here, Yuma, and Kingman along the Colorado River. So nearly a third of the western half of the state is all dispatch, fire dispatch out of our office upstairs. Another function in this building is our hotshot crew, the Prescott Hotshots. They're a national resource that we have the privilege of hosting here on this forest, which gives us opportunity a little more. Should they be here, we've got obviously easy and quick access to that resource when they're here. But they serve a national need. As a matter of fact, they're in Nogales, Arizona right now, supporting the Coronado National Forest. We also have in this facility our helicopter, Helitac crew. That's both a local and a regional resource. And these are firefighters trained in initial attack firefighting, but their specialty is helicopter operations. And as we talked offline ahead of time, they're able to do not only the tactical response to a fire, dropping firefighters in to fight the fire, but hooking a bucket underneath to supply water. They also provide a tremendous amount of logistic support, supplies, or for further shuttling other firefighters in. So they're in this facility. And then we have a large supply cache, which is part of a large national network. The Prescott Fire Cache serves the greater Southwest area along with the cache in Silver City. And but they're also part of this larger network. They can tap into anywhere in the country if we have a need here, or they can ship supplies elsewhere if the need is greater, which often is the case later in the summer. We'll see things shift to the northwest.
Okay. Do you man the fire watch towers that we have around here?
We do. We have 4 lookout towers across the forest that are staffed, and those are managed by our district offices. We have the Bradshaw district office here in town, as well as the Chino Valley office, and then the Verde district office in Camp Verde. Those 3 districts are responsible for the management of not only the lookout towers, but our prevention program and our fire engines.
And when do you start manning your towers?
Usually within the first week or 2 of April. I believe April 4th we were fully staffed this year. We have some flexibility depending on the severity of the season, but ordinarily over the last 6 to 10 years, the history's been by the first week of April, we're fairly well staffed up with those lookout towers.
So when the monsoons occur here in the Prescott area, does that help somewhat in your firefighting response? Because I know you get a lot of lightning strikes, but I think also the rain helps reduce some of the fire potential.
Sure. I would answer that by describing maybe the phases. So when the monsoons start to set up, ordinarily they come in rather dry. We'll see the lightning without the rain for a period of a few days to maybe a week or so. That sort of elevates our readiness and our response. But certainly that's almost always followed by significant rains. It takes a while to maybe get widespread precipitation across the forest, but certainly once those rains follow the lightning, we see a rapid decline in fire threat, fire severity, to where we can now start supporting other regions that are getting into their fire season as we come out.
And then how long do you continue to man the towers and keep a high level of firefighter capability here?
That's a great question. The lookout towers we will staff until the fall. We bring those folks on for nearly 6 months at a time, April through September, and most often we'll keep those folks until the end of September. If for some reason we see that the fall is maybe dry, or we haven't had a robust monsoon, we have avenues to keep them on a little longer, but ordinarily they'll be staffed fully for the 6 months that we bring them on. The other thing that we do to maintain a level of readiness, we have in our preparedness plans, we have what we call a drawdown, a minimum number of resources we will keep on the forest at all times. Okay. There are, again, phases or levels of drawdown. Certainly at this point in the season, as we are coming into the fire season, that drawdown is pretty high. But when we get very wet to where there's minimal activity, we'll allow more resources to support other areas of the country.
Yeah. And you don't have people just sitting here waiting. You actually have people deployed out right now in the forest, right?
We do. As a matter of fact, so the folks that are here and are not currently assigned to a fire, they're working on some of these fuels projects I was talking about. This idea of the first step to initial attack being fuels mitigation. Several of the folks that are here are fire engines, and some of the folks, our fuels crew, they're out there right now working on either preparing projects for this fall, whether it's a prescribed burn or thinning, doing some forest thinning. They're out and about doing that work. Otherwise, we do have folks assigned. We have a fire engine supporting Mojave Valley. I'm sure you heard of the Gordon fire. No relation. There was a fire on Friday along near Needles, California, and we sent a fire engine there to help. Our hotshot crew is helping the Coronado National Forest, and our helicopter crew is helping the Tonto National Forest south and east of Payson.
Okay. And we're in front of a map here of the local area, but I think you serve not only local area, but regional and national, right?
We do. So as a national resource, the Forest Service, we are a federal agency. So we are part of a large network nationwide, from Alaska to Florida, even Puerto Rico. We have national forests in Puerto Rico. So with that, when it comes to fire response, there is a large network with a very intricate and pretty robust mobilization system, to where we are located geographically and tactically here in the Prescott area to serve the Prescott National Forest, as is the Coconino National Forest from the Blue Ridge Reservoir to Flagstaff, Payson with the Tonto National Forest. So there's a local component and a strategic and historic allocation of resources there. But when the need arises, being a federal agency, we can tap in within our own Forest Service resources. It's quite an intricate network to mobilize resources, from aircraft to firefighters on the ground, hotshot crews to fire engines. At a moment's notice, there's a very intricate system to tap into and get things moving within moments of a need. And depending on how far they're coming from, we could have them within an hour from Flagstaff or within a day from the Northern Rockies.
Okay. Well, thanks, Pete. I think that's a great introduction, and I've been through the facility. I think it'd be important for our viewing public to have an opportunity to see what other capabilities you have here. You've talked about them, but sometimes people need to see them to really understand what's available.
Absolutely.
So, we'll be back in a moment, and we'll start looking at what you have here in the way of a facility. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
This is the first stop in our tour of the Prescott Fire Center, and I'm going to hand it off to Jeff.
All right, thanks, Catherine. So we're here with Scott Splice, and Scott is our zone fuel specialist stationed out of Camp Verde. He's responsible for fuels management on the east zone of the Prescott National Forest and part of the Coconino National Forest as well. So welcome, Scott.
Hey, thank you, Jeff.
So tell us a little bit about what you do and what your responsibilities are.
Well, I have been given the opportunity to be responsible for about almost 900,000 acres of National Forest System lands with regard to fuels treatments, and that could be either a protection up against wildland-urban interface emphasis, or in restoration with regard to restoring fire-adapted or fire-dependent ecosystems.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit more about the larger focus here on the Prescott National Forest, maybe the extent of the program, how many people are involved, the acres that we manage each year?
You bet. Presently, today, we're sitting in a small meeting, and we're going over bids from a recent opportunity we've been given to look at contracting a lot of the fuels work that we do. We are looking at opportunities to treat upwards of another, 8 or 10,000 acres of ground for the Prescott. What we do is we try to find those areas that are probably most at risk up against the wildland-urban interface. So Prescott Valley, Chino. We have a number of subdivisions that we border. Cherry is another area. There are areas out near I-17 and east. We also have Camp Verde, Cottonwood, And all of those areas, we're constantly looking for opportunities to provide additional protection. And then we also work with our resource folks. It could be our soils and watershed folks, our range folks. It could be wildlife. And we look at opportunities to utilize fire as a resource management tool. Fire is probably the oldest management tool that we're aware of. And we're a part of that oldest profession. I couldn't help it though, sorry.
So, Scott, tell us a little bit about who does this work and the different types of work that we do.
We use our own crews. We use our hotshot crews, our fuels crews. We use our engine crews to do a lot of the work. But there's so much work to be done that we oftentimes reach out for contracts as well. And we have a number of contractors that are familiar with our area that do good work here. We have other contractors from outside the area that are looking for opportunities to work here. And today that's one of the things that we're doing, is taking a look at some of the opportunities presented by these contractors.
Okay, so I noticed, as the folks can tell, we're sitting here in the ready room of the Prescott Hotshots. So how do you utilize them to do the work? What do they do for us?
Typically the Prescott Hotshots, they're a national resource. And so for the most part, when they're at full force or full strength, they're somewhere in the United States working on ongoing fires, fire suppression activities. There is a core group among the Prescott Hotshots that we do utilize during the off season, the non-fire season. And we will put them to work with saws along with our other crews. And a lot of times what they're doing is thinning brush, thinning timber, stacking, piling, burning, just kind of a full service crew, if you will, along with our Helitack crew, along with our fuels crew, along with our engine crews. They all do similar work. If they're not fighting fire, that's the kind of work that they do. We actually would like to think of them more as natural resource managers as opposed to just firefighters. Their work is so much more than just putting out fires.
Okay, very nice. So the Prescott National Forest is roughly 1.3 million acres. How many acres a year do we treat in terms of fuels management?
Well, I can tell you right off the bat, not enough. And that's unfortunate. However, we do compete with other forests within the region for dollars. We also attempt to treat as much as we can each year, and I'm thinking we're probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 15,000 acres a year is what we treat effectively. It's not just fuels treatments either. We also have timber resources on the Prescott National Forest, and we have a resource manager for that particular area as well. And that shop, if you will, they account for several thousands of acres each year of treated land where we're actually earning a small revenue, if you will, through the timber resources that are harvested.
Okay, so one of Scott's other responsibilities is he is responsible for the prevention and education program down in the Verde Valley. Can you talk a little bit about that?
You bet. So I have 2 prevention technicians that I work with. And we have a fairly extensive prevention education program. There is an organization called LAFS, or Life and Fire Safety, that's been around for about 22, 23 years now. And quite frankly, it is a hallmark within the Verde Valley of prevention education. We work with the other 7 fire departments that are down there hand in hand, and we put together interpretive and education programs each year with that group. We reach out to roughly 5,000 or 6,000 school-aged children every year with programs that are offered in both the spring and the fall. The spring emphasis is always on some kind of outdoor or natural resource aspect, and the fall emphasis is always some kind of structural aspect to life and fire safety. So we share that opportunity that we have created with our structural brothers and sisters. as far as life and fire safety is concerned.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the partnerships and the relationships with other entities down there in the Verde Valley. You mentioned the other fire departments for the prevention and education. I'm assuming we can talk about that with the fuels as well, the importance of that.
Yeah, we've got some other partnerships that we work with closely in the communities, typically fire departments, as well as landowners. We're not necessarily that branch of government that goes house to house. That would be something that would more than likely be the responsibility of your local fire district or fire department. However, we do work very closely with them. And we look for opportunities to educate homeowners, educate businesses and other private land owners or entities that exist in and around the Prescott National Forest for opportunities to create defensible space, opportunities to create just any way that they can help protect themselves in the event that we do have a wildland fire in the area. That's a constant, continuing education effort that goes on. A lot of people come and go each year. We have new people that move in, folks that move out, and so we find ourselves, and the analogy I always use is teaching 100, 200, 300, and 400 level classes, just depending on how long someone has been in the area or how much information they actually have. And we're always happy to start right at the beginning, and we're always happy to also entertain those 400 level classes, if you will, as well.
Okay, so you said the beginning, and the reason why we stopped here first, Katherine, was because fuels management and then the prevention and education part of our program is essentially the first leg or the first step in what we do here. So in order to be successful on the wildfire end, we have to be good at fuels management and prevention and education.
Is there anything specifically you can share with us, just a couple of highlights that people could remember when it comes to?
Well, I think that, you know, there are a number of wildfires that have occurred in and around the Prescott area in the last decade or so, and maybe a little bit longer. And for some folks, they may seem as though they were just a couple years ago. For folks that have never been here, they don't have that history and they don't understand necessarily the importance of the work that we do or that the fire departments do with regard to fuels treatment, prevention, and education. All of those things, as Jeff stated, are incredibly important. And so the Indian fire might be one that people here in this area would remember. The Lane 2 fire up in
Crown King,
Crown
down around
King,
Crown
yeah.
King.
Give me a couple more that have happened.
Dose
recently.
fire.
Dose fire.
There was obviously a Lane
2013.
1 if there was a
Lane
Lane 2.
1, you bet.
Yeah, you bet.
I mean, there's a number of fires that people can remember. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to look at areas that have risk associated with hazard, and what the potential is there for wildfire and what could happen. And one of the things that we're really trying to do is just stay ahead of that if we can. Every project that the fuels managers, the prescribed fire specialists and the fuels managers do is we're constantly looking at an opportunity for us to mitigate the fuels that are there, lessen the hazards, lessen the risks, and provide opportunities for our folks, especially our folks, the firefighters, to get in there and do some protection kind of work and to do it safely. If we do our jobs to the extent that we can and we do it well, we create much better opportunities for the men and women that are fighting those fires to go home and to keep all of their toes, to keep their fingers, to keep all the stuff that they have. And I think we're also pretty close to some significant tragedy in the area, and we understand that, and that has redoubled our efforts. And I don't know if it made us any more serious about the work we do, but it certainly makes us more urgent in the work that we do.
What can we do to make your job easier in terms of mitigation?
I think continuing to ask questions as the public, I think it's important. If you don't understand what's going on, ask those questions. If you do understand what's going on, be a voice. be a voice for the work that goes on, support the work that we do. There is an obvious and oftentimes very frustrating side effect of fire, and that's smoke. And we're going to find ourselves having to live with smoke one way or the other. It either is handed to us in a wildfire situation or it is presented to us in more controlled situations through prescribed fire and other treatments that we have. So we can get it one way or the other, but I think that we would like to, as best we can, try to manage that situation so that it is not something that we're forced to deal with.
Can you tell us about defensible space and what's a couple things we can do in our own homes? Is that one of your
yeah.
areas of?
Yeah, I sure can. You know, probably the best and biggest thing that folks could do would be to try to find a resource specific to defensible space online or at your local Forest Service offices or your fire department offices. They all have information. And rather than go through a list of things to do here, I think it would be a far better effort for folks just to seek those outlets for information. And like I said, they're readily available. There's Firewise, there's Ready, Set, Go. There's a number of opportunities for folks to take advantage of.
Okay, thanks, Scott.
Yep.
Appreciate that. Let's move on. Okay, Catherine, our next stop here at the Prescott Fire Center is here to the Prescott Fire Cache. And so we have Hector Basso with us, and Hector's the cache manager. And we are in one of 15 caches nationally. Hector, welcome.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about what you do here.
We manage the supplies and equipment that go out to all the fires in the area of Arizona, southern Utah, and southern Nevada. We have a staff of 8 folks on permanently and up to 40 people when we get into the peak of our fire season. We have a 24-hour turnaround time from when the orders get placed to us to delivery to the incidents.
Okay, as I mentioned, this is one of 15 caches in the country. Tell us a little bit about the distribution and how we fit within that network.
The 15 national caches share inventory amongst ourselves, depending on where the activity is at any given point. We can move that inventory to areas of critical need from areas that aren't affected at any given point. Here in Prescott, we have just shy of $6 million of inventory. Nationally, we're close to $60 million. And as we roll into the peak of our fire season, that supply and equipment will come here. When fire season is over, we'll move that equipment to other areas that need it.
Okay, and so we're talking a lot about equipment, and folks can see from behind us here, we've got lots of boxes. What type of equipment do we have here? Can you tell folks?
Boy, we've got everything from the clothing, the yellow and green that you see our firefighters wear, to the shovels and hand tools, fire hose, nozzles, food, the meals ready to eat, or MREs, you name it. Whatever the firefighters need, we have it here for them.
Okay, so you talked a little bit about the meals ready to eat. Doesn't sound that good, obviously. Is this the only food that the firefighters are eating out there, or do we supplement them with something else?
Boy, you know, this stuff is just to get them through the first 24 to 48 hours. After that, if a fire continues on, then there's catering units that come in, or local units, local cafes will provide for the smaller incidents.
Okay, and so give us an idea of how much equipment we got here. So what's the most popular item in terms of distribution? Do we have any idea what that is?
Boy, the most popular item would probably be the hose.
Okay. And so how much hose do we have here?
We have 3,000 lengths of hose, 100-foot length. So 30,000 lengths, or 30,000 feet of hose, 6 miles.
Okay, putting you on the spot there a little bit.
Yeah.
Sorry about
Tough
that, Hector. And so how does the equipment, these supplies, how does it get out to the folks on the line? Can you tell us a little bit about how that works?
Sure. For us, when the order comes in to the cache, we process that order. determine the most expeditious way to get that supply to the firefighters. For us, that will most often mean we bring in a driver that works for the federal government. They will then get that delivery to an incident base camp. And from the incident base camp, the fire will then make the determination on where it needs to go to an individual spike camp, the line personnel that need to use that equipment. So from our perspective, it's just from here to the base camp. Base camp will then distribute.
Okay, so a little bit like any standard distribution system, any warehouse network probably.
Sure.
Is that okay? So firefighter, generally speaking, is seasonal in nature. Can you tell folks what you do in the off season? Are we busy 12 months out of the year here, or how does it look? There's got to be a time of the year that's busier than the other. Or?
Sure. The busiest time of the year for us is the off season. We spend a lot of our time managing the policies and supplies, and we spend a lot of time developing new equipment, sitting in on panels, and just organizationally getting ready for the next fire season. A lot of the work this year is dealing with invasive species acts and mitigating the transfer of invasive species like the quahog mussel, the zebra mussel. Trying to limit the exposure that we see, contaminated waterways versus non-contaminated waterways, and the way that the federal government and we as a cash system fit into that. So we say that we're more busy during the off season than we are during the on season. During the on season, fire season, our mission is very direct. It's 100% support of ongoing fires and our firefighters. During the off season, it's much more procedural and setting up business practices for the next year.
And so we're really lucky in the Prescott area to have the cache right here with us. So certainly cuts down on the travel time to get supplies to the line, whereas in some of these other areas where we have fires, it takes quite a few hours, even days sometimes, to get equipment to them, or?
Absolutely. Being centrally located in central Arizona here, most of our deliveries are 8 hours or less. Other parts of the country definitely looking at longer drive times, delivery options. We're just really fortunate to be where we are. We have other caches that we work with here in the Southwest. The Silver City Fire Cache is our next closest resource, and they handle the supply system on the New Mexico side of our region.
Katherine, what do you think? Pretty impressive?
Yeah. How do you interface with other agencies, like for disaster relief, if it is impacting the community? Do you ever provide things for residents, or do you work with other groups? Or
we do. Those are much more rare events, but through our national organizations, we treat it like any other incident, like a fire. And an incident is created, and there are cooperative agreements that are in place that allow us to have a seamless support of those types of incidents. And we do. We support hurricanes, human-caused disasters, floods. It's been a while since we've done something like that. We even do international efforts.
We go to a lot of places, for sure.
We do.
No doubt about it. We service not only the Forest Service needs, but all of our federal, local, and state cooperators. So we are working closely with the Bureau of Land Management, Bureau of Indian Affairs, National Park Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Arizona Division of Forestry, all the local fire departments and agencies there as well. Okay, Katherine, our next stop here at the Prescott Fire Center is upstairs to the Prescott Air Tanker Base. And we have Cindy Matthews with us, and she is the Air Tanker Base Manager. Welcome, Cindy.
Thanks, Jeff.
So tell us a little bit about what you do here.
I oversee the Air Tanker Base, and what that entails is managing the ramp where air tankers come in and out to load with fire retardant. And the air tankers are on contract, so we do a lot of contract administration and logistics as well.
So tell us a little bit about the air tankers itself. Describe to folks out there what exactly an air tanker is.
An air tanker is a fixed wing aircraft, and it can carry fire retardant and the amount varies depending on the type of aircraft. So in our fleet right now, we have what we call single engine air tankers, which have single engine and carry about 800 gallons of fire retardant. And we also have larger airplanes that carry more, anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4,000 gallons of retardant.
And how much land mass would that cover? Like the 800 you said, the first one?
It depends. They have different coverage levels, and that depends on how many gallons are coming out of the aircraft at any given time. And they can set it to setting between 1 and 8, and that's 1 would be 1 gallon of retardant over a 10 by 10 foot square. That'd be a coverage level 1. If it was a coverage level 8, it'd be 8 gallons of retardant over that same distance. So it really depends on what the coverage level is and how many gallons are in the aircraft.
Cindy, tell us a little bit about how many air tankers we have here in Prescott.
At this moment in time, we don't have any air tankers in Prescott. They're on national contracts, so they go wherever there's a need, and at this moment there isn't a need for an air tanker, so 0.
Okay, and then nationally, then how many do we have nationally?
Nationally, there's a little over 20 aircraft on federal contracts, and it can be supplemented with MAFs, the military aircraft, or aircraft from Canada or Alaska as well. So roughly 22 aircraft on federal contract, large air tankers.
Okay, and so these air tankers, these 22 air tankers, they travel around from air tanker base to air tanker base throughout the summer. They kind of go where the activity is or where the need is, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and what type of aircraft are in the fleet?
Right now there are about half a dozen different kinds. There's P2B, C-130, there's RJ-85s, there's MD-87s, and there's BA-146s as well.
Copy that. So folks at home, they can't quite see our base out here, but just out my left shoulder, we've got our air tanker base. And this is where we load the planes with retardant there. And we've just finished a project in cooperation with the city of Prescott. Can you tell us a little bit about the improvements that we made to the air tanker base?
Sure. In the last year, we've recently completed a pretty large renovation. Previously, there were 2 loading pits, whereas now we have 3 and the ability to load 2 air tankers at a time, as opposed to previously we just had the ability to load 1. So we've increased our capacity for our light fixed wing parking for our air tanker loading pits, and also improved our helibase.
Very nice. So a couple large fires we've had in recent years. We've had the Dosey fire, which is just out the window here that folks could see. We've had the Indian fire, and of course everybody sees the air tankers flying over town from time to time. And so tell us a little bit about the travel times or the turnaround times, how quickly they could get to fires and where they come from. They not only come from the Prescott area here, but we use air tanker bases in proximity to us.
In Arizona, there's 4 large air tanker bases. There's one in Winslow, Arizona. There's another one at Williams Gateway, Phoenix Mesa Gateway, excuse me. There's another one in Sierra Vista, and then here for a total of 4. Air tankers can come from any of those bases or from any of the bases across the country. And in terms of the length of time it takes, it really just depends on where they're coming from and how quickly the aircraft can fly, which depends on its make and model.
So you mentioned that these aircraft hold anywhere from 800 to a couple thousand gallons of retardant. How long would it take to fill up some of these planes with retardant?
Again, depending on the size of the tank, our pumps load at 400 to 500 gallons per minute. So a handful of minutes to load.
Okay, and tell us a little bit about the retardant and what exactly is this retardant and what does it do?
The retardant is in a liquid form, and it's concentrated. The tanks are here on premises, and we mix it with water. So it's 1 part of retardant to 5.5 parts water, mixed on demand at the retardant mixing plant. And it's comprised primarily of water. There's salts, there's fertilizers. There's also a gum thickener to make it stick a little bit, and a colorant to make it visible from the air.
Okay, and so the air tankers, the large airplanes, they get a lot of the coverage, but tell us a little bit about some of the other fixed-wing aircraft activity we host and have here in our fleet and at the base.
We have this time an air attack, and what that does is provide aerial supervision for the aviation resources that are on a fire, and also they communicate with the folks on the ground to let them know where the fire is at, what it's doing, and provide support and direction to folks both on the ground and in the air.
And so you mentioned that these aircraft are contracted, so the Forest Service doesn't actually own any air tankers necessarily. I believe we own one that's kind of a demonstration project or that we're working on that is hosted out in California. But so these aircraft are used through contractor, is that correct?
That's correct. The Forest Service has contracts with a handful of different private vendors, and they work under those contracts.
Okay. Expensive. This is a really expensive business. Can you give us a few numbers on exactly how expensive these aircraft cost to operate?
It really varies again on the company and then the type of aircraft. They have a daily availability, which is an amount that's paid throughout a given length of time, which is generally anywhere from 130 to 160 days out of the year. And then in addition to that, they're paid for their flight time if they're to fly, and a few other things like extended standby if they're asked to stay longer in the day. And so it really varies on the price.
Okay, so as we talked about, Katherine, a little bit with the fire cache downstairs, we're extremely fortunate here in the Prescott area to have an air tanker base right in our backyard, essentially. Pretty impressive operation. Cindy's been our manager here for quite a few years, and we'll see a lot of activity from time to time throughout the summer with air tankers supporting us here in Prescott area.
So what's your, if you don't mind my asking, your average day like?
We start the day out with preparing for a morning briefing, so we'll gather weather information, safety information, and information from our dispatch center on what's going around both in the local area and around the southwest. Mm-hmm. That's generally done in the morning. We present that to our aviation resources, and then it really varies day to day on if there's activity requested for air tankers. And so if we have air tankers here and we are running an active operation, we'll be managing the ramp, making sure that they're safely parking in the spots that we would like, letting them know when they're clear to start their aircraft and taxi out of the operational area. We're also overseeing the retardant operation as well.
Is someone here 24/7 or?
No, just when
There's a fire.
We're here 7 days a week during the daylight hours. Basically 9 to 6 are standard hours, and then longer if necessary.
All right, let's move on to our next stop. Okay, Katherine, so our next stop is upstairs to the Prescott Dispatch Center, and we have with us Christy Sullivan, and she's the Dispatch Center Manager. Welcome, Christy.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about what a dispatch center is.
So what we do here, we have several resources that we send to fires. If you see the big fire camps, it all starts up here. This is the hub of where all the fires actually start. Not start literally, but we'll have calls coming into the office, and then we'll start sending resources, the crews, the aviation resources, supplies, overhead. We're extremely busy when there's a fire. We have several cooperators we work with, and we have 7 full-time employees in here. The Bureau of Indian Affairs, Bureau of Land Management, Fish and Wildlife, and the Forest Service. So we also work really directly with the State Department.
So essentially you're saying this is the center of the universe.
This is the center of the universe,
Okay.
right here.
So pretty much the intelligence center and kind of the brains of the operation up here, this is where all information comes through, basically?
Yes, all the information comes through up here, and then we filter everything out to the fires as quickly as we can.
Okay, so you mentioned quite a few other agencies, federal partners, And so this is a federal dispatch center essentially for a multitude of land management agencies. And tell us the extent of the coverage. Where do you dispatch?
We actually dispatch for the whole western side of Arizona, so pretty much from Prescott all the way to the Colorado River, all the way. We have a map over here. You'll get a shot of that, but it's all the way up almost to Lake Mead and then down to the Yuma, almost down to the border, or all the way down to the border.
Okay, and so you mentioned we have 7 folks that work up here. Are they all full-time people, and are you open 365 days a year? Or tell us a little bit about business hours.
We are open 365 days a year. We do not do nights unless we have a large incident on the forest or anywhere in our area of responsibility, and pretty much never close. We do have an on-call dispatcher that will take call after hours, and we all take at least a day or two through the week.
Okay, so I think folks are probably real interested in some of the details and some of the specifics, Katherine, about how the center operates and what happens when somebody calls in with a fire report. So I think Barry, who's Christy's assistant, might be able to help us out with that if you want to talk to Barry.
Sure.
Okay. Barry Wallace, welcome.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about how the process works when somebody reports a wildfire.
Sure. So, yeah, we get reports of fire and smoke in a lot of different ways. We have lookout towers up at some of the highest points in our coverage area. We get a lot of reports through them. Citizen reports, just folks calling 911, those calls are then transferred to us. Agency employees driving around seeing smoke. So we receive smoke reports and reports of fire in a lot of different ways. And so once we get that report, we plot it on our map and do our best to narrow the location down as close as we can, and that leads to the appropriate response that we send. So all the agencies have planned for fires to start on their land, and based on where it is, there's a plan for how many engines, crews, aircraft, the number of resources they're going to send. So we activate that response, we hit some tones on the radio, and launch those resources out to those smoke reports.
So Barry, you talked a little bit about aircraft. So you guys dispatch resources, aircraft resources. How does that work? We had a stop over here. We talked to Cindy and the air tanker base manager. Tell us how that would work when a fire report comes in.
Sure. So really similar to how we'd send an engine or a crew. With aircraft, like I said, we plot the location, determine the appropriate response, and in some cases that is going to include an air attack, helicopter, and at times air tankers and beyond. So we'll fill out what we call an aircraft dispatch form. It basically has the coordinates for the fire, any hazards, aviation hazards in the area, make sure we confirm the right frequencies that they're going to be on, and that goes to the chief of party, whether it's the air attack or the helicopter manager, the air tanker base, and those resources then load up and head on out based on that aircraft dispatch form.
Okay, so Christy mentioned a little bit about our federal partners. Can you talk about our connection and cooperation and coordination with the Prescott Alarm Room?
Sure.
With the Prescott Fire Department?
You bet. So it's really daily coordination involved between the Prescott Alarm Room and the Prescott Dispatch Center here, both in terms of burn permits. You know, if the alarm room is issuing burn permits, it's good for us to know that in case we do get a smoke report, we can narrow it down to maybe it's somebody burning on private land. Resource coordination, we want to know what the fire departments have available at their disposal, and likewise for the fire departments to know what we've got in terms of resources that we can send to a wildfire. So there's also a component of medical response that we've got built into our plan for the Forest Service here, that if we get a fire, we can call the Prescott Alarm Room and they activate what we call a medic team, which is a group of individuals that are advanced life support that could be at the incident on the line with the firefighters out there and provide that support in terms of emergency medical response. So yeah, definitely a lot of interaction with the alarm room.
So you're talking about a medical team that actually takes care of the first responders, not necessarily public service, but it's solely designed to help out with the firefighters out there.
Correct. That's the intent, is to be on the fire line. These are folks that are red carded to be on the fire line, and they're right there. They're built into the command structure for the incident, and yeah, they're right there on site, ready to help.
So certainly this is a really busy center. We got a lot of tools. There's a lot of monitors, a lot of computers in here. Tell us a little bit about some of the tools that we use to keep track of all these moving parts.
Sure. So a lot of tools you kind of see around the room here. A lot of it's just intelligence for any of us to be able to glance up and see what's going on with the weather. We keep the satellite and radar images up, fire danger information, a lot of mapping products. We use GIS for most of our mapping needs. There's a myriad of systems that we're engaged with on a daily basis in the dispatch environment, and it ranges from intel products to reporting tools. Our CAD system, computer-aided dispatch, tracks resources and incidents. Yeah, so that's the plan, is just to have at our fingertips all these tools and information that aids in doing our job.
So we have a direct contact with the folks that are on the ground from here. Christy mentioned that we provide dispatch services all the way over to the Colorado River. So what type of network is in place for us to be able to talk to somebody in Prescott all the way over to the Colorado River? How does that work?
Sure. Yeah, our communications system is built basically at strategic locations, high points throughout central and western Arizona. Those radio repeater sites allow us to connect with Forest Service resources across the Prescott National Forest. And then for the Department of Interior, like Christy said, we're able to talk to folks up in and around Kingman, down to Lake Havasu, and down to Yuma, and really everything in between. So yeah, it's putting those radio sites at the right spots, high points across the state, and our radio dispatch console allows us to connect to all those resources.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about the larger dispatching system regionally and then nationally. I mean, we're just one little spoke in the wheel in terms of access to a much larger network. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah, sure. So it's considered a 3-tier system. At the first tier of the dispatch center or system, you have the National Coordination Center, and that's in Boise, Idaho. And then at the second tier, you have geographic area coordination centers across the country. And then at the third tier, you have local dispatch centers, which right here at Prescott is one of those. So, you know, as we have needs on an incident locally, we're able to use resources within our span of control and have direct access to those engines and crews and aircraft. But as soon as we exceed that, then we're able to go to our geographic coordination center. In our case, it's in Albuquerque, the Southwest Coordination Center, and then they have access to all the third-tier dispatch centers in Region 3 for those same types of things, that hotshot crews, engines, aircraft. Once the region exceeds their capacity, then the orders can go up to the first tier there at NIC in Boise, and then they have access to everybody in the country, all the geographic coordination centers. So that's kind of how an order goes. Say you need a hotshot crew, you try to fill it locally. If you can't do it, you place it to the GAC, the coordination center, and then they search the region. If they can't do it, it goes up to the national level, and then you go out to the whole country from there.
So it's pretty quiet in here right now, but we've got some real recent examples of this center really ramping up and having a need for resources to come in with the Dosey fire just a few years ago. So with that particular fire, if we need 20 or 25 engines and aircraft, where do they come from?
Sure. initially during those first few hours, that first operational period, like I said, we exhaust what we have here locally, and then there is a mechanism within the region here to go direct to your neighboring dispatch centers at the third tier. So for us, that'd be Flagstaff, Williams, Phoenix, Arizona State, Tucson, and be able to tap into their pool of resources for engines, crews, overhead. And then from there, once that gets exceeded, then yeah, you're just up to the second tier of the dispatch center, and you just keep going up the tier until you get the resource that you need.
So really within the matter of hours, maybe a couple hours or even 30 minutes, we could have 15, 20 engines and all sorts of aircraft in the air responding towards the Prescott area if we were to need some help.
Yeah, you bet. Good case in point there would be the Dosey fire. Yeah, the assistance came from all the neighboring forests, the Coconino, the Kaibab, the Tano National Forests. From Arizona Dispatch Center, we're able to tap into essentially all of the fire departments in Arizona. So we get a huge need filled there. And especially, obviously, when you're dealing with fire departments, you get that structure protection element with the Type 1 and 2 engines. Yeah, and then the aircraft they come rolling in as the incident commander requests.
Okay, so I think folks are probably curious about how many fires we have on the Prescott National Forest each year.
So on average, going back to 70s, we're looking at about 90 fires per year on the forest.
So about 90 fires per year. And then how about with the center at large, when you factor in some of the other federal partners here, how many fires do you guys manage each year from the center?
So since we've entered into partnership with the Department of Interior in 2013, between all the agencies of BLM, Fish and Wildlife, BIA, and Forest Service, we're probably over 100 fires a year. I say 90 fires a year on the Prescott National Forest is the historic average, but lately here over the last 5 years or so, we've seen numbers more in the 50 to 60 fires per year range. So yeah, between the Forest Service and the DOI agencies, we're upwards of 100 plus fires per year.
Okay, so that's a downtrend in terms of incidents that we're managing each year here. What would you attribute that to, do you think?
I don't know if I have a real good answer for that. I mean, some of it could be the way fires were reported, the strategies involved, if lookout towers were staffed. I think a lot of it relates to detection. I think there's a lot of fires across the forest in real remote areas that we just never know about. So yeah, it's hard to say. I don't know if I've got a great answer for that one.
Okay. Certainly some favorable weather the last couple years in terms of spring moisture, and then some wintertime moisture, I would say, has helped out a little bit.
It's true. Yeah, here in 2015, yeah, we had pulses of moisture all the way through May and into June. So in terms of the fire danger indices that we track, it really, what the numbers show, gave us about a 2 or 3 week fire season last year here for the forest. And we're kind of seeing that same trend again this year in 2016 with some pulses of moisture all the way through May here, and we'll just have to see what June brings. Historically is probably the highest occurrence in terms of human-caused fire activity in June. So.
Okay, so you mentioned human-caused fires. What is the breakdown or the split in terms of what percentage of our fires are human-caused, and then what percent are, say, natural lightning-caused fires?
Sure. So it's about, historically, like I said, going back to 1970, it's about 60-40, with 60% on the human-caused side and 40% on the lightning. So,
what else would folks out there like to know about the center, do you figure?
Well, we just have a great time in here. It's a good team, good times, and we enjoy working together. And it really is a rewarding place to work, because basically what we're doing is it's a support function. We're providing support to the folks in the field, and that's rewarding going home at the end of the day knowing we were able to provide that support.